Hey everyone, welcome back to Inventing Construction. I'm Ross Griffin, and today we have a very special guest, Gary Cowan. But before we introduce Gary, let me introduce the topic and subtopics. We're going to discuss Services Design and BIM. What a mess. A bit tongue-in-cheek there for you. The subtopic, let's talk about Gary's digital journey. Are we really producing good quality designs? Do we have the skill sets in the industry at the moment? It's a big question. And what do we need to do better and why? But let's not delay. Gary, perhaps you can introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, your past, your present, and a little bit about the aspirations for the future, perhaps.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me. I'm Gary Cowan. I'm head of digital construction for Kane Group. Kane Group are Northern Ireland's premier design and build MEP services contractor, and I've been with Kane Group for around about 12 years now, since I first joined. Personally, I'm a BIM geek. I'm a BIM nerd. Started life as a design engineer. Graduated from Queen's in 2006 from mechanical and manufacturing engineering background. So really more of a component design sort of guy. Did a lot of 3D work and SolidWorks, Solid Edge, and kind of then migrated across into the building services industry once I sort of graduated, and really brought that design ethos with me to the building site of designing a building almost like it's a machine, it's a component, the very, very tight tolerances and stuff. I was very surprised when I joined the industry at how loose the tolerances were, and more of my own background, and I have two older brothers, and my oldest brother would be a joiner by trade, so I worked for him as a youth, and 16, 17 I was a joiner's mate on site, sort of run about his gopher doing his tools, so I picked up a lot of skills on site as a sort of tradesman, labourer type thing. So always had that mindset of why is a building designed so loosely, so flagrantly? Why can't we actually look at it like a machine, like a very precise piece of equipment going together? So I suppose that really drove the desire and the passion in me for looking at BIM and treating BIM in the same sort of sense, designing a building almost like it is a prefabricated item, like we could literally bring it to site, like a big Meccano set and put it together. Lego, so at the start, it was a very much question is why can we not? So I suppose I've spent 20 years of my life proving that it can, in fact, be done. And that's exactly where I've got to at the moment. Yeah,
it's amazing contrast, isn't it, actually, machining a piece or a tool or a component versus how we approach the construction industry. It's very much about let's figure it out on site and what do we do next? And I think, well, we should do this, as opposed to, well, hang on a second, we had this decision made 6-9 months ago on the design in the model. That's how you build it. That's what you build it to.
Yeah, well, you've always had two camps in construction. You've always had the design side and the guys and the men and women on the ground, the boots on the ground that actually put it together and build it. And over the last 20 years, we've seen these two worlds collide almost and become one as such. And that's not to say that it's been easy. It certainly hasn't. Certainly when I started 20 years ago, it was very much still that traditional mindset of the drawings were just a rough indicator. This is roughly how it should go together. And the onus was very much on the boots on the ground to have the experience and understand these systems inherently and being able to put them together. Obviously, BIM over the last 20 years has been very focused on architecture and that side of it. But obviously, I'm a building services engineer. I come from it from a completely different angle. We almost have to treat the building like a component because the systems that we were trying to design and fabricate and put together need that requirement of that sort of level of consideration. And you can draw till the cows come home, but is it installable? Is it commissionable? Will it run? Will it fail? There's so many layers to that cake when you look at the built-in services side of it, as regards to the architectural side of it, where it's more the onus is on artistry and conceptualization, which is a skill in itself. But for me, I've always treated construction like a big Meccano set. How do we get this? And once I had sort of spent quite a lot of time mastering the software side of it, then the onus for me then became translation of that from the design guys, bridging that gap basically between the boots on the ground and the design people in the office. Making those two worlds seamlessly fit together has been my
the value that can create for the business, for the teams, for both stakeholder groups, if you like, that pre-con and post-con. You know?
It's very hard to see any negative from that process. You know, everybody gets better, everybody gets faster, they become more invested. Obviously, financially, it's better. There's less wastage, your carbon footprint. It's very, very hard to see any negative of it, because it also drives all the stakeholders to have a bit more care and consideration for it too. You know?
The only negative really is the mindsets of people. Sometimes it's just negative. It's a negative mindset, meaning it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to come in and go, come on, there's value in this, you know. Yeah, but how could there be value? We're going to spend more money doing the BIM model. Like, it's costing me more money. You're going,
I mean, everybody has that initial knee-jerk reaction of, oh my goodness, how much is this going to cost? But they don't see the wood for the trees. You know, yes, it's a very big investment, and you know, you do have a bit of a sharp shock at the start, having to buy the computers, buy the hardware, bring people in to train. You know, once you get over that initial hurdle and that hump, as I call it, it's actually smooth.
That's when the efficiencies come.
That's when it starts to be seen.
And it's not a couple of months; it's a couple of years transition period, really. Like, so your return on your investment there from a design contractor, design and build services company, like you're not talking about turning it around in a year. You know, you really first of all need the buy-in from the stakeholder groups, from management. You need the investment there, and then you need the plan of transition. Basically,
it's a very long process, and it needs somebody at the helm who understands it intrinsically and understands the value of it and understands what can be gained from it, to try and drive it. If you're kind of shooting into the dark, you may get some very quick local successes, but on the long term, it will fail. You know, you won't implement the workflows correctly. You won't implement the right training procedures or everything that goes with it, and it can fall very quickly on its face. And then it's almost like we tried it and it didn't work, but you didn't give it the real try you should. You know, when I think back to when we started doing Revit and BIM 20 years ago in Kane's, it was literally almost like transitioning from CAD to Revit. It was very tentative. It was just like AutoCAD 2.0. We coordinated everything in 3D, but then we actually spat out 2D DWGs to hand to someone else to then do all the title blocks and stuff, and then that created another divide in the workflow. And that if the Revit guy, and I say Revit guy, it was only me. I was only Revit guy. So if I had to been off or anything like that, the whole team ground to a halt. And I kind of left Kane's for a while and went out on my own and did my own BIM consultancy and got a wee bit more experience, and come back 2 years later, and they were still doing it that way. And I was like, right, well, guys, now we're going to do sheets in Revit, and everything's going to be. And even at that stage, it was mind blowing, and the change, and we don't have to go that workflow. You know, the time taken on a drawing compressed really quickly again. And I suppose that really was a catalyst for me to look at all of the processes, all of the workflows over the last 20 years, and understanding areas where we were spending quite a lot of time with very little return. So making fusion sheets, for example. There was one job that we did where there was 1,200 drawings had to come out of the Revit model. And when I sat with the back of the envelope calculation and worked out, it was probably around about 10 minutes per sheet by the time I created the sheet, put all the information in, set the view on, made it all look nice. For 1,200 sheets, that worked out about 8 weeks' work for one person. And even the human side of that, to ask someone to spend 8 weeks of their life doing that.
It's like
I certainly wasn't going to do it.
You know,
oh my goodness! So it's dehumanizing. You know, it's awful. So again, automation started coming into our workflows, and how do we actually make this faster? How do we automate this? How do we remove human error? Never in a sense to replace anyone as such. No. Always another feather in the cap for all of our team. Make it faster, more make efficient. It better, efficiency. So you're saying about the change in the technologies. It's actually been overwhelming at times when you actually look at it, and there's been so many things to consider and get almost right in the overall cloud around us to make them all point inwards and start to work seamlessly together. It has been quite.
It takes time, you know, because it comes back to, you know, you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of what you're talking about here, you're trying to upskill, train, educate people about the efficiencies they create, but a lot of people wouldn't look at the fact it was going to take one man 8 weeks, or one person 8 weeks to do all these short sheets of drawings. That actually, if we do it in an alternative way, this time next year, we will never do this again. And the amount of time, it's not just the 8 weeks, it's that compounded on every project year after year for as long as you want to run now, you know?
Well, that's it. I mean, everybody gets very stuck in their ways, don't they? You know, you have a tried and tested way, and you think that's the only way to do it. I've never ever felt that way. I always think that there must be there's a better way to do this, and not to ever take away from anyone's job. It's just that you would sit and watch someone doing a task that you think to yourself, I wouldn't like to do that myself. Do you know what I mean? I really don't enjoy that. So I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't certainly do. So I always watch the team and look for any frustrations within a team. And if I hear anyone giving off or saying, surely there's a better way, that's almost like we'll put a pin in that and we'll come up with a concept. And lots of our Dynamo scripts and automation workflows have derived simply from watching people struggle and saying, is there a way we could get better at this? Where are we wasting time?
So really, if we reflect back onto the reason you're kind of interested in digitization comes back to that original kind of educational piece. You were in university and working on machining rather than the construction industry, and it kind of just involved and I guess design manager would be in a good position for you to hold, and then it's kind of into BIM and into that entire management of the digital transformation rather than just digitization within company.
Yeah, it was all about workflows as well. I mean, I started life on the sites. You know, I studied at Queen's and got a degree in manufacturing and mechanical engineering, but certainly started on building sites at the bottom rung of the ladder. I had dreams when I graduated of being a consultant, a design consultant, but I obviously couldn't possibly try and design large-scale MEP systems without any real-world knowledge. So kind of decided early in my career that I would bounce out onto the sites and gain a bit of knowledge on the sites of just literally how do things go together, how do you support ductwork and pipework. Just the grey areas that I had my own understanding really was for me. Spent a few years doing that, and then just because I had that ability of design that I kept always getting pulled back into it. And you're either a contracts manager or a designer, and I kind of always did both. I sat with two caps on, so would have sat and value engineered drawings, first principle calculations, worked out, value engineered them down to what they needed to be, and then changed hat to my contracts manager hat, and went out and sourced labour, sourced materials, method statements, risk assessments. So to come back to the BIM side after a number of years doing that, I think that was the key to the success, was because a lot of people, I always say, they can talk the talk in the BIM world, but they can't walk the walk. You know, they're very critical of workflows, they're very critical of models, but you say to them,
there's a theoretical aspect.
How many models have you produced? How many Kobe tables have you pumped out of a model? Have you faced the pain? You know, it's very easy to throw a Kobe sheet through a processing up and go, it's rubbish, without understanding the work that has went behind that, and maybe put people off, you know, and be very offhandy. So it's understanding that, you know, there's BIM in itself is an insanely complex process, but you have to understand what it's all about, construction. If you don't understand the construction part of it.
It's the only reason we're at it, isn't it? It's, at the end of the day, is creating efficiencies in construction, you know, and using today's capability and technology to help us, you know. So
that's kind of where I morphed it, and I mastered Revit, mastered the software, understood the construction side of it, and then that's when I saw the disconnect in between. Well, we've got a design team on the Northern Irish side pumping out really good designs, and the workforce is standing, scratching their heads, don't know how to use this. You know, they weren't at the same speed. So we had to roll almost back for a year or two, go over to the sites and educate all of the people. So all of our guys and girls on the ground now are all using tablets. They're all digital. They're all on BIM 360. They're all querying the 3D model. 2D drawings really aren't. They're still a deliverable, obviously, for our client, but we don't generally use them. We don't measure on site anymore. Everything's set out with the total station technology and our precision setting out system. So, like, measuring tapes are banned from sites, and we don't like to see I see anybody measuring. I'm like, what are you? You know, why are you measuring that? The old days of somebody working the A1 drawing, scale down to A3 and measuring with an inch tape and doing the mental arithmetic is gone. No, it just doesn't.
You would say it's gone, but I'm not too sure, because if coming from a quantity surveying background, you know, in certain countries, that MEP factor is something that is kind of pushed to the side and outsourced. No, that's the engineering consultant responsibility. We don't need to quantify that. We'll get a PC sum and put that into our bills of quantities, and it's all kind of CSA, or that kind of architectural, civil and structural piece for us. But the complexities we have now today in every single building we're building, not just hospitals and data centers, but even our homes, you know, require this huge uplift in understanding of MEP. And kind of what we've noticed is that it's one of the design areas that's still a little poor in its development. I'm talking generally in the industry now, as a whole, it's poor in its development. maybe not from a design, but from a data structure. When we're trying to process information, we find that, systems aren't system-based. They might be material component-based, and then we can't actually divide the system because cost for the system is key for us because it's the benchmarking that we'd apply to future and so on and so forth. And all of that aspect of it is, we find is a bit of a challenge. So really, are we producing good quality designs at the moment, or is it a case that there's a few outliers, a few trailblazers like yourselves that are actually doing good quality and everything else is just business as usual?
I think you're right. The general trend is going towards more, and we are as an industry and as a collective, I think we are trending towards the better. But there's certainly leaders in the race, and there's people lagging behind. Certainly, I think the trailblazers are showing the slower people behind what can be done, but it almost makes it out of reach. Like, how would I ever get to that point? They don't see the work behind it. They don't understand the process and the manpower and just the whole ethos and the drive behind it. Because the designs are getting better, the people who are good shine, and we can see who the good players are. And unfortunately, you also see who aren't pulling their weight. So you work with some big firms and you receive digital models from them, and you look at them and go, my goodness, like, you've been paid this considerable amount of money, and where has it went? Where's the effort? But again, it's horses for courses. People don't use BIM for the right sense.
No,
I don't understand why M&E consultants, for example, are doing coordination in a stage 2 and 3 model. What's the point? We push for early engagement with our clients.
Absolutely.
Why pay a consultant big dough to make a half stab attempt at coordinating when you can engage with us really early? We can come in at stage 1, 2, whatever stage you need us to come in. We'll start to build our model on a construction grade model from the earliest point possible. We won't fluff around in a stage 3 to then wipe it and start stage again. 4. So I think the structure of it and how it is planned is very key to the whole thing. If BIM's just chucked on at the end as an afterthought, may as well not even bother.
There's a lot of companies at the moment, they do geospatial and scanning and stuff for as-built creation. I find that hilarious. I think there's a big business for it at the moment, but I think it's something that's going to become less and less and less, because ideally what we should be doing with our model development is that's what we're creating. Aren't we building from the models that we're creating? Don't we get to the as-built, the asset at the end? Aren't we tagging as we should be during that execution period? Why do we need the geospatial aspect?
I think until these buildings are built by robots, there will always be a need to check, to verify. It's a human endeavor. Perhaps, but like there's things that happen on sites which drive change, and you have to be able to capture that change really, really quickly. And the old tools of red line markups, that's what we're currently going through that pain at the moment. We're working towards a reality capture workflow for as-builts. And as you say, a lot of the people in Kane's are like, hold on, we've done it this way for 25 years. What are you bringing in here? And I do get a bit of kickback still. But when you bring them all together and you show them the technology and you show them the workflows and you say, you could have spent 2 weeks with 2 men running about the site doing hand doodles on pieces of paper, which we can't actually even read on our side. And now we'll have this technology. And fair enough, yes, the machine was £25,000. We've now got to pay this guy to come in and do it. But when you weigh it out over the entire project, for even one project, it pays for itself. It really does. And it excites people. It really gets the people going. And even though, we do have that resistance, with the right management and the right care and attention, you can sort that out very quickly. And
I think if you come back to something you mentioned a while ago about that output from models, which is drawings, they're the contractual requirement right now, models for information only, really. And it comes down to whether the client's ability to understand really what it is that they're asking for. So you can have really crap models in terms of information quality. Yes, clash detection is down to, a couple of 100 clashes, and the drawings coming out they look okay. So everything seems to be super, but it's non-transferable. So what happens is contractors, as you just mentioned, are just going, this is rubbish. Okay, we're going to wipe all that. We'll just start again. We'll remodel, because we'll model it in a way that we can do it. That management along that design process for clients is a hugely important aspect of it. Setting the principles in place, BIM execution plan, whatever have you. But there's specifications around what it is that I want from this particular project. Is it a digital asset, digital twin? Is it something that I really want to automate FM, or is it just for construction only becomes key. And there's an educational piece there for clients. And I think that from the sound of things,
there's no doubt. I mean, the amount of times we've been involved in the project and you read the BIM execution plans and it appears like there's going to be some CAD FM crowd brought in, they're going to blow the socks off the client, and you spend 2 years working on a model and producing all of this data and field data and technical data, and there's a huge amount of work goes into it. And then at the very end, it's 2 guys in a van and they haven't even got a laptop. And it's like,
clipboard.
What is like the amount of man hours and just human effort? It's awful disheartening to put your heart and soul into something to realize that it's been for nothing.
Exactly.
So it puts you off what you're doing. It demoralizes you in your job. So I don't ever like doing that. But the amount of times where I've read a BEP and we have to provide all the data on the hand dryers, for example, but nothing on the generator system that would kick in if the build never went off. So they really want to know how much it's going to cost to change this hand dryer, but God forbid the generator goes down because no one has any data on it. So the information side is huge, and it has transformed so much over the last 5 to 10 years with our clients. Same thing, and it's opened up considerations, whereas before we would have drew the very bare minimum. One typical floor, one typical apartment, and that was it. But then once we started actually duplicating up through the floors, sometimes just to look at the geometry and make sure there wasn't anything missing or where we're missing, we quickly realised then our QSs that were on board were starting to squeal for access to the model. And we realised that was a tipping point, that we actually had more benefit from drawing what we weren't supposed to be putting in, because we're able to digitally quantify. We're able to do sort of model comparisons for takeoffs, automatic takeoffs, automatic, where are you, snapshots, things like that. So,
and your change management aspect.
Yes, we very much didn't want to draw the whole building at first, but now we do. We see the effort and the kickback you get from it, the benefit.
I found that interesting. My first came interaction with it, I think, about maybe 4 years ago after returning to Ireland, when we were talking about especially buildings that repeat, apartments, hotels, in some respects, some hospitals to a certain degree, where a standard room was modelled, but that was about it. It's fine, they repeat everywhere. We don't really do that in Denmark. Everything's modelled because you need to understand your supply and all your spatial awareness around all your services, etc. But also the fact that you can actually then build from the models as opposed to your basic layouts. There's a huge amount of value in it. And for the rinse and repeat levels, if you like, it's not as laborious as a unique building type, if you like. So there is efficiencies to get there, but the value that you get from it is
definitely
is amazing.
Some of the other management systems, you're saying about the management, like BIM 360 we use for our issue tracking now as well. So initially, obviously, it was purely coordination to start. But now our whole operations team now really get involved, and we're tracking quality issues, we're tracking health and safety issues, we're tracking commissioning issues. And whereas previously it would have been a mostly empty model with a few islands of detail, now we try and fill the model with as much detail.
That's your base point of operation, if you like, for the building, not only from a design perspective, but from a build, execution, etc.
And then that also sort of focused us on our template, our project template. So we decided that we were when we first started doing the Revit models, they were all very different depending on what job you're on. There was different system codes, the colours were all different, and you could tell between myself and our other BIM lead, Craig Doran, you could tell whose job it was, if it was my job or his, because you could see the flavour, as I call it. You could see the wee nuances within each one. So we sort of decided maybe a couple of years ago that we would actually just join forces, and we made one central project template where we learned everything we learned over the last 15, 20 years, we then implement in the centre, so that every job starts from the same sort of line in the sand of we've learned everything up to this point. And that has worked really well for standardisation and classification and stuff like that. So
also, members of the team go back and forth between the different teams and so on. You can begin to see that actually it's quite easy now to transfer people. The process is the same, the output is the same. It's just
even simple system codes that if you walked on the one job and you were looking for a drainage drawing, it's a 52 series. If you walk on another job, straight off the bat it's a 52 series drawing I'm looking for. So simple things like that, you wouldn't actually believe the impact that it has. So it's been a steady ladder from 2012 or 2013 when I started with Kane's. It was very much baby steps up a ladder, but a lot of it was live on the job. It wasn't like
you tested.
Here's a project, and we'll have 2 years for you to play about with the guy. It was literally on the job. Either it worked or it didn't work, and if it worked, it was very quickly melted into the pot and became part of the gameway. And if it didn't work, then it was over the shoulder. But I'm just very fortunate to work with such a great team of people. Do you know what I mean? And it takes a village. Do you know what I mean? I know I come on all these shows and I talk about what we've done and what I've achieved, but I'm just one cog in a very big machine, and it takes a village to work in the same way and have that same mindset. It's infectious, is what I say. I kind of come on the sites and I'm like an excited school child. I'm come on, you see what we've got and the new toys that we've got, and everyone's very receptive. So, it's only as successful as your weakest link as such.
Is there a sweet moment where it's a slow, gradual build, and you're kind of, I guess you're playing the educator for quite some time, but then suddenly it's skyrockets for you because the economies of scale of people of
a lot of the stuff I do on my own time. I have a 9-to-5 job in running the department and making sure all the quality's there and everything's there. The innovation side of it sort of ebbs and flows with the workflow. I know our director Martin sort of gets sore hot sometimes because he doesn't see the quantity of it. I could disappear for 3 or 4 weeks and no one would see me, and then I burst back on the scene with a brand new workflow or a new automation, and it changes everything. So I'm fortunate in that sense that they sort of give me the time, but I don't wait on it either. I lay at home at night. My YouTube algorithm is just basically XR and BIM and everything. So I'm constantly, like, my wife cracks up. Even if I walk into a Tesco's, I'm immediately looking up and I'm snagging all the services. And she says, "Look, we're only in for a ton of beans or something." And I'm like, "Who done that? Who done?" And then, so she loses her mind, but she also understands that the success comes from that. Having an innate eye for it and a love for it. There really is no other word for it.
Do you think we have the right skills in the industry at the moment?
No, and that's another reason why I took on being a STEM ambassador as well. I've got 5 children of my own, and I've sort of encouraged all them to sort of try and follow in my footsteps. But at the same time, I see a real gap in the industry. I know certainly when I left university in 2006, my head was full of sweetie mice as well, that I was going to go straight into a job and I was going to get 50 grand a year. Everything was going to be brilliant. And my first job I went to, I asked him for 50,000 a year and he laughed at me and said, "Son, you have a long way to go." And I think I got 16. It was my first one. So it was a real eye-opener for me at the time. And it was embarrassing, certainly, and it was one of those life lessons you had to take on the chin. But very quickly I realised in the industry that everybody coming out from university and all, they just don't have the practical skills that's needed. You cannot do a course anywhere in the UK for built-in services coordination. You can go and learn to be a mechanical or electrical design engineer, and you can learn the theory behind it. You can size pipework and ductwork and cables and all that sort of stuff. But when you actually come into the industry and someone says to you, how do you make that mesh? How do you make all that fit? Plus make sure that it still is commissionable and it's not going to fail. And like the amount of people that are just don't know how to do it. And most people that come into what I do fall into that position. You've a lot of my team are all just normal people. They're not engineers, they're not design engineers, they're not degree educated, but they're smart and they're good at problem solving and they're really quick thinking on their feet. So the black and white way of the old way of having to go to university and do your 5 years and all that, I think that is actually gone. The technology moves so quickly now that by the time you enter and you leave, it's the playing field has moved, it's changed. So how do we keep up with that as an industry? We have to be, the industry and the education industry has to almost be brought to the coalface and stay there and watch how it's being done.
Yeah, it's almost like the very technical professions are, because it's dramatically changing in the industry, that they can't keep up with the pace of change. So your university education is obsolete by the time you come out, and the jobs aren't available because the entire part of the sector was automated, or whatever the case may be, or offshore, or whatever people like to give out about. But it's almost like we're going to have an amalgamation of the professions, somehow, the professions, if you like, and we're going to need to teach this kind of basic component to the industry, like that human connection piece, that communication piece, that ethical piece, and then whether you're an architect, an engineer, or a QS, or an MEP, it doesn't really matter. You learn in on the project, or you learn with the company, or whatever.
Companies offering apprenticeships and experience to people who are studying is key to all this. You can't just sit in the university and learn remotely. You need to be on site. You need to understand it. And some of the lecturers as well, I mean, no harm to them, but they've maybe worked in the industry for 2 or 3 years after graduating, and then they've went back into teaching, and they've spent 25 years teaching with no return to site. So you're teaching people from your 25-year-old experience. I think they should be made to rotate. You should have to do, in a 10-year period, you should at least have to do 2 or 3 years working in a practice or working what you preach, practice what you preach as
indeed,
such.
Yeah, that's
just to keep you, current on technology and workflows and people.
Yeah.
The AI is going to change everything here.
It's
scary what we're facing here. The dehumanization of the workforce is going to be a problem, I think. And people looking for a quick buck, can I get rid of people just to automate that? And I don't think that will be the way.
Your ethical piece I talked about. Yeah. It's it's definitely an interesting time for sure, and it's kind of over the last 5-8 years, maybe it has increased dramatically. I think the rate of change. I think more and more people are talking about it, and we're in a position now where people realize it's a reality and not a question of if. And we're trying, as you can see, everybody's trying to grab onto it now. You can see all the companies out there trying to, whether it's the sustainability piece or the AI piece or whatever, people are kind of grabbing onto and saying, this, I know we're doing this, we're the leaders in that.
It's almost taken away from the whole thing. What are we all here to do? We're all here to build a building in the end of the day, and I think we can get lost in all this noise in the background.
The noise,
You lose the focus of what it is you're actually trying to do in the first instance.
Exactly.
And I get that from some business owners' perspective, that you can get lost in all the magic of it and all. You do lose it, but you need someone with a clear focus and a clear knowledge, and can see through all of that. And I seem to have that skill. I don't get distracted by the bells and whistles. Now I do at the start, obviously. If I see something and I think it's really good, but I'll drill right down into it. I'll meet the people behind it, go and see the team, look to touch it with my own two hands. I never quite believe anyone trying to sell me anything. I really have to stretch it out myself and feel it.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't think there's any magic button, or as the BIM magic button was back in the day, there's no green sustainability button. It's all process and people. And if we can solve the process and people challenge, then we're on
and it's data in, data out. If you put rubbish into the model, you're just going to get rubbish straight back out again. And it's understanding that and knowing that and putting all the pieces in place to ensure that doesn't happen, and paying the right money as well. That's a problem. We have all this technology and we have all these workflows, but the money side of it still seems to be a problem. And even like subbies, specialist subbies, for example, we would reach out to fire protection subbies, and they would charge us more to do a design in Revit than 2D CAD. And I'm going, but how? Because you and me are going to probably do complete email tennis for the next 6 weeks. And even emails alone.
That's their workflow, right? That's their workflow.
Somebody sitting looking at a BIM 360 model of what I've sketched over the top of their CAD, and then they're sent me snapshots back where they could have just been drawn it in 3D, and would have been this conversation would have been over 3 weeks ago. And then when you look at their quote, they're wanting more money for 2D, and you're like, that just doesn't make sense to me.
I think it's the infancy of it all. I think for companies like that, they believe that it's more expensive. It probably is more expensive for them initially, because they need to, what they're doing is they're doing it twice. They're doing 2D and then maybe they're doing it in 3D, and then they're verifying, or they're doing it in 3D and then they're verifying their 2D. Oh, that worked. That's okay. We'll send them that. Or no, we'll just send them these 2Ds. And so for them, there's an additional expense because they haven't really, as you mentioned earlier on, they haven't really understood the workflow. They haven't understood, you're not creating drawings and then creating a model, or a model and creating drawings. You're cutting your sheets from it.
It's like driving a Lamborghini and jumping out and pushing it from behind.
They
just don't know they don't understand the tools they have in their hands, and they're making bad decisions based off that. So it's as a group, we'll have to get better, I think.
So while the industry has moved, I guess there's still an awful lot to do, and I think that's the opportunity. Like you guys in your workflows and what you're providing in terms of design and execution quality, there's a big part of that. It's about then finding the right clients, I guess, that will, what they would perceive taking on the risk of bringing someone in early. But that's just a contractual relationship. You can pay someone to consult you. You don't have to bring in for the construction piece. You can bring them in to consult. It can be a couple of stages in the gateway of how you organize your procurement, but then maybe they're not getting the right advice, and that's
it. BIM consultants have a lot to play in that game. Anyone can label themselves a BIM consultant nowadays. You've done 3 or 4 years of BIM, you can class yourself as a BIM consultant, but that doesn't really make you. We're back to the talking the talk and walking the walk. Not very many people. And again, when you do the BIM, you don't always actually build as well. And I know that I'm maybe in a unique position where we're design and build, so I kind of see both sides of the apple. Take a bite from each side. But it should be done. BIM is a very complex thing, and trying to hand that over to another company is probably where a lot of the disconnect happens, and the BIM people think we've made this brilliant model, it's full of data, we've done everything we need, and they slap it out, and the contractor gets it and goes, I don't even understand what we're supposed to do with this. It's purely a tick box exercise for the client, and it gets farmed off to them, and then there's a complete disconnect because he just pushes all of that responsibility down to his BIM contractor, and they look after all the stuff, and there's a disconnection completely. So I think it works best when it's managed in-house. I mean, you're not sort of cheating with offshore labour or anything like that. We've built a very big team in our digital construction team, a very diverse team from men and women from all across the world. It's been fantastic, the amount of people that we've managed to get in. A lot of the university students that are studying in Queen's and Georgetown, because I lecture at Queen's and all, I kind of get first access into them to get. So quite a lot of them are engaging with us and coming on board, and it's proven really, really well. We're having great luck recently with some good candidates that have started doing it.
I do agree with your point about that transition piece between the stakeholder groups coming from design to construction. And I think the Conti Severas have a really important part to play here in the traditional sense, because if the QSs are really vetting the design material coming out, and I don't mean in terms of buildability, or that's not their role, but in terms of the information, because if they're using that information to prepare or produce their cost plans and bills of quantities, they'll have already qualified whether the information is usable and functional for them to quantify, because the contractor uses it in the same way effectively. And what we've noticed is when we're in that workflow with them, the contractor has a much better experience when they receive the design information, the models, the drawings, the spec, because it's been qualified in a way that's not design related. It's nothing to do with design, it's got to do with information. And can we understand it? And I think that's a big role for the QSs. And it's one of the reasons maybe they haven't started to get into that, because they're looking then at, well, we need to know Revit, and we need to know, you don't need to know any of that stuff. You free viewers, it's information. You need to know process, understand the process. Whatever tool you have, whether it's a Costex for calculation that you use or whatever, that'll feed into your process, but understand the process, not necessarily.
It's just having the bravery to step outside your comfort zone. You know, if you're used to working in 2D PDFs and Bluebeam and Excel sheets,
printing and ruler, you know.
Yep. We roller wheels for their line measure. I've did it all. You know what I mean? It's just it's having the strength of yourself to know that there's better ways to do it, and not being afraid to maybe admit that you're behind. You know, maybe some of the older generations. I know I work with some older ladies and gentlemen, and you have to treat them with a bit more respect and a bit more kid gloves. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not trying to reduce their experience or their knowledge. You know, you kind of say to them, look, you're gold dust to me. You know, your experience is fantastic, but here's how you could be better. You know, here's how, you know, what would you, I always go to them and say, what do you struggle with? You know, what do you find yourself wasting time on? You could be doing something better. And they'll say to me, oh, you know, taking off. And I say, well, have you tried this? Have you looked at this? And it's much more positive than it is negative, you know. Definitely is. It's
a nice segue into our final part, and from an industry wide perspective, as opposed to services design for the moment. What do you think we need to do better within the industry, and why? Perhaps we've touched on some of the subjects, but
for me, it's collaboration. Do you know what I mean? I'm very tired of the poker game that sometimes it can reduce into. And I understand that there's so many facets to that. You know, there's money, there's politics, there's all that.
It's culture.
It's culture. It's everything. It's very hard to put your finger on any pulse at all. But for me, the collaboration part, as I have witnessed collaboration really taking hold over this last 15 years, you see the actual building in the centre getting better. You know, I've seen the models getting better over the years. I've seen the understanding of the models getting better. I've seen all the firms involved actually getting better, whereas we worked with architects maybe 10 years ago and it was a very rough building. And whereas now we're getting that innate sense of quality in the models and accuracy, which is for us as a DFMA, design for manufacturing assembly, that is inherently important to us. People floating in ceilings at rough heights and leaving big gaps in the bulkhead and all. Especially when you start to use technologies that we've implemented, like AI or AR and XR, you start to see the bad modeling. You start to see the corners that are being cut. So it's driving a quality for us all, you know, from architectural to structural to civils to the MEP guys. We all now can see each other's designs a lot more than we used to. And
now you're
sort
onto
of
something.
you're
the
sort
transparency
of
aspect.
Transparency, yes, and we could be very guarded in our models, and there's so much IP in our models, but we give our models out to anyone that asks for them. We're driving change in the industry, and I'm driving change in all parts of it. And I suppose it's lead by example for me.
Absolutely.
I'm always looking for someone to follow, and I've had the fortunate to work for some brilliant engineers over the years where I've sucked all the knowledge from them, and I just intended to be the exact same now for the rest of the industry. It's very humbling for anyone to listen to me or follow what I do, so I don't take that lightly. I take that as a great responsibility, and I do share everything, all my workflows, my Dynamo scripts. It's an open book for me. I don't. I've seen instances where people have taken my work and have rebadged it and have used it as their own, which I don't like, because I would teach any man or woman in this world how to do Revit, how to do what I do freely. I spend quite a lot of time doing podcasts. People from all over the world contact me at nights and on my own hours. I'm happy to give back, but I don't really like anyone just stealing your work. There's no pride in that whatsoever. No. You'd rather teach a man to fish.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly. I mean? Yeah, I think the collaboration piece is super important. There's an ingrained kind of culture in the construction industry, even though it needs to be super collaborative. It's not. We're silo based. We're if you go back to even in education universities, you're silo based there. That's where it all starts and stems from in reality, in my mind. And one of our biggest struggles is now we're transitioning from a moment where actually I could hold all of my information. You couldn't see anything. You could see the end result of the workflow or the process, but you couldn't see how I got there. So you couldn't see my rough work. You couldn't see all the kind of homework in order to get there. But now everything is shown, warts and all, and that's made people very uncomfortable. I think in a previous podcast, we would say, like in Cosmos, we would show our cost plans or cost estimates to all the stakeholder groups. It's their information, not ours. All we did was rebadge it up as a cost plan. So we took MEP design, quantification, system-based, priced it up. Now we want to know, well, you're the engineer, you designed it. Have we covered everything? Have we missed anything out? You know your specification, you wrote it. Yes, we read it to understand it, but at the end of the day, it's yours. So can you help us and we'll help you? And that has powerful effects, I think, with people.
It does, yeah. The more you bring people in, and the more you sort of put your arm around them rather than pushing them away, you find that you garner great working relationships with people, and we find that with our clients as well. We come to the site with a can-do attitude. We will solve problems. We're not just going to sit back and say that sounds like an architect's problem or that sounds like a structural engineer's. No, that's not our ethos. It's a design team. The word is team. We're all a team, and we'll come up with ideas certainly, and we'll float them across the table. But we're not ever sit back on our laurels and say, "Oh, we would know how to fix that," but you may put your hand in your pocket. And that works for us because our clients keep coming back to us, trust us with our work, trust us with the quality.
Exactly.
We're market leaders in the digital sense, but for the actual buildability sense, we provide a first class.
Yes. So if you can get to commissioning and commission the building and not have any challenges and it's up and running.
FM aftercare, we've started to look at the FM now. Tony Brady's now running the FM aftercare, and we're actually starting to capture all of our projects and maintain them.
Okay, great.
For the next 25 years. So that's for us. That's the goal, is that a complete turnkey solution from conception to demolition, stage 1 to 7, 8. Yeah, that would be the ideal for us. Yeah.
Then you'd hold all the kind of skills then and understanding both cost and carbon life cycling, if you like, around the buildings, if you have the FM component to it as well.
Definitely. You're able to design it with that in mind, operate it with that in mind, and collate it and quantify it during its life cycle from conception to finish. Have not done it yet. The theory's there, but certainly we're in pole position to do that. Yeah.
There isn't many companies or businesses that can hold their hand up and say that they know life cycle assessment or life cycle costings to a T. No one is tracking this data. We haven't started it really. And if you go into any business or company and ask them about what their energy use is, they're going, you probably have to go down to accounts to go and see if there's the bill there somewhere so we can see. And you're kind of going,
you're only as strong as your weakest link. You know what I mean? And that's the same for every system, even your carbon. It's a guesstimate.
It is. Absolutely at the moment. But Gary, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Really happy to have you on the podcast, and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
Thanks very much for listening. There's a LinkedIn link below in the show notes. We would love to connect with you.
We hope you enjoyed it and have you with us in the next one. Thank you very much.